The morning sun rose over the quiet suburban community of Clarebrook Estates, where every lawn was trimmed to perfection, and every mailbox was painted in the same dull beige. It was the kind of place where conformity wasn't just expected, it was enforced. The Homeowners Association, or HOA as everyone called it, ruled with an iron fist disguised behind polite newsletters and community emails. And on that peaceful street, nestled behind a row of identical houses, lived a man named Darnell Cooper, a quiet, hard-working man who didn't care much for gossip or HOA politics. All he cared about was water, pure, clean spring water. Behind Darnell's modest two-story house was a natural spring that had been there long before Clarebrook Estates was built. It bubbled up from the ground with a soft, gurgling sound, trickling through moss-covered stones and feeding a small pond that shimmered under the morning light. Darnell had discovered it the day he moved in. The water tasted different, crisp, cold, alive. Over time, he began collecting it in barrels, saying it reminded him of the stream near his grandmother's home in Alabama. It became his ritual. Each morning, he'd walk out with a smile, fill his containers, and store them neatly behind his shed. To Darnell, it was simple. He was preserving nature's gift. But to the HOA, it was an eyesore and a violation of community standards. It started with a note, a neatly printed letter tucked under his door one morning. Dear Mr. Cooper, it read, your recent activity concerning the collection and storage of water violates Section 14B of the Community Cleanliness Code. Please remove all visible water containers immediately. Darnell had laughed when he read it, shaking his head. Cleanliness Code, he muttered. This water's cleaner than the tap. He folded the letter and tossed it in the trash, figuring it was just a misunderstanding. But the next week, a second letter arrived, this one not so polite. It stated that failure to comply would result in a $500 fine. Darnell frowned. He wasn't one to pick fights, but this wasn't right. That water wasn't junk. It wasn't garbage. It was from the earth, clean, natural, untouched. He decided to call the HOA office to explain. When the community secretary, a woman named Brenda, answered, he tried to keep his voice calm. I'm not hoarding water, he said. It's a natural spring. The water's flowing from my land. I just collect a bit for drinking and gardening. There was a pause, then a tone that dripped with condescension. Mr. Cooper, the HOA has specific guidelines for outdoor storage. Large containers are not permitted. It creates an unsightly appearance and may attract pests. Please remove them by Friday. He hung up, shaking his head. Unsightly, he muttered. Nature's unsightly now? By the weekend, he received another notice, this one a formal citation. $500 fine for unauthorized water collection. Darnell laughed bitterly. Hoarding spring water? You gotta be kidding me. But what hit harder wasn't the fine, it was the principle. The HOA, a group of neighbors who barely knew him, was fining him for something nature had freely given. Still, Darnell didn't want trouble. He paid the fine reluctantly but left his barrels where they were. Weeks passed, and soon, more fines followed. $100 for non-compliance, $250 for repeat offense. One morning, he walked outside to find an HOA representative taking pictures of his backyard from the sidewalk. When Darnell approached him, the man simply said, documenting evidence. That was the day something in Darnell snapped. He walked down to the edge of the spring, staring at the trickling water that had become his small sanctuary. His reflection shimmered on the surface, tired eyes, worn from years of working double shifts and now battling neighbors who couldn't understand the peace he found in something so simple. Then, slowly, he smiled, a calm, knowing smile that carried both defiance and peace. You'll want to play with nature, he whispered. All right then. That night, under the soft glow of the moon, Darnell went to work. With a shovel and a determined heart, he widened the narrow outlet where the spring fed into the ground. Then, using a few boards and some rocks, he crafted a small dam, one that had been diverting water toward his barrels for months. He loosened the structure, letting the water flow freely once again. But he didn't stop there. He cleared the surrounding brush, dug deeper into the soil, and allowed the spring to spill naturally downhill, right toward the community walking path that bordered his yard. By morning, Clarebrook Estates had changed. Water shimmered under the sunrise, winding its way through flowerbeds and lawns. Birds sang louder than usual, and the air smelled fresh, earthy. But the HOA didn't see beauty. They saw chaos. Lawns were damp. The mulch near the community bench had washed away. Some residents complained that their decorative pebbles were displaced. By noon, the HOA president, a stern man named Richard Harper, was at Darnell's door with two other board members. "Mr. Cooper," he said sharply, "you've caused property damage. The entire greenway is flooded." Darnell stepped outside, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. "Property damage?" he asked. "No, sir. That's nature doing what it's supposed to do. Water flows. Always has." Richard's face turned red. "You deliberately tampered with the spring." "I didn't tamper," Darnell replied evenly. "I just stopped hoarding, like you said. I let it flow." The men stared at him, speechless. The irony hung in the air like thick mist. The HOA had accused him of hoarding water, and now, by letting it go, the spring had reclaimed its natural course, cutting through the manicured perfection of Clarebrook Estates. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, whispering. Some were angry. Others couldn't help but smirk. For years, the HOA had bullied residents over mailbox colors, lawn heights, even holiday decorations. And now, their beloved control was washing away, literally. Over the next few days, the spring continued to expand. The water created a narrow stream that wound through the cul-de-sac, turning into a gentle brook that children soon began to play near. Frogs appeared. Ducks landed. The neighborhood that once looked like a lifeless postcard suddenly felt alive. The HOA tried everything: sandbags, pumps, even calling the city's environmental office. But when officials visited and tested the water, they smiled. "This is a natural spring," one inspector said. "It's protected. You can't alter or block it." That was the final blow. When Richard confronted Darnell again, Darnell only shrugged. "You said I couldn't store the water," he said. "So I didn't. I let nature handle the rest." Weeks later, the HOA quietly removed the fines from his record. The board even proposed new landscaping to complement the natural water feature. Darnell often sat by the edge of the stream now, sipping from his cup of fresh spring water, listening to the laughter of kids and the gentle murmur of life returning. What had once been a petty dispute had turned into a small miracle, a reminder that nature doesn't belong to committees, rules, or fines. It belongs to everyone, especially to those who respect it. And though the HOA never admitted defeat publicly, everyone in Clarebrook Estates knew the truth: one man and one spring had humbled the system built on control. As Darnell would say with a quiet grin, "You can fine a man for collecting water, but you can't stop the earth from flowing." The following weeks brought an unexpected transformation to Clarebrook Estates. The spring that once sat quietly behind Darnell's house had now become the heartbeat of the entire neighborhood. What started as a trickle had turned into a shimmering ribbon of water that wound gracefully between the homes, catching sunlight and carrying the soft sound of flowing life. Children who used to stay indoors glued to screens now spent their afternoons racing paper boats and catching frogs, their laughter echoing through the manicured streets. Elderly neighbors began sitting on their porches again, watching the gentle flow and recalling their own childhoods by rivers and streams. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt alive, not artificial or sterile like before. But not everyone shared the joy.